to control $1.2 million worth of property, which I bought at around about $80,000 below what the banks value it at. Okay? Which means that's all instant profit straight away. And I don't have to pay for those properties for over a year. And it's very likely in a year those properties are worth not 1.2, but maybe 1.3 to 1.4. My outlay is virtually nothing. Okay? And in the meantime, my money's tied up making these sort of returns. You can see how investing is not a bad hobby. Okay. Especially when you don't need the money. It's fun. You can do a lot of things with it. So let's look at property very quickly. What you want to look at is property. And you get property to double every 7 to 10 years. It's quite handy. A lot of statistics to say that on average across the board residential property has done that in the last 146 years. Not all property though. Some people in the room would have property that's doubled in 5 years. Some people have property that's taken 20 years to double. Depends. What we want to look at, Bill and Mary, for instance, they're earning $50,000 a year, say. They want to replace their income by buying 2 investment properties. Okay, now this will only take a couple of minutes to go through. We'll look at how they can buy 2 investment properties for them to retire. $50,000 a year is about $35,000 after tax, say as an example. Everyone with me? So what we're going to look at is buying 2 properties. Who's committed to buying 2 properties in the next decade? You'd be willing to consider doing that. If you get help with finance, contact, especially if you could buy them virtually no money down. I'm sure you'd be interested in doing that. So year 1, we're going to buy a property. We're going to select a property. Properties I tend to buy around $300,000. Okay, less, more, but let's say $300,000. Works well for this strategy. And the second year we don't buy any property. The third year we buy a second property. And that's all we're going to do because we're basically lazy. Okay? That's all we want to do. So you don't have to buy 100 properties to make this work. 10 years' time. It's going to take 10 years. Always make your plans more conservative. Don't count on 7. Take 10. Could take longer. So you can even make it more conservative if you want. Let's say 10 years. These properties are going to be worth $600,000 10 years after you buy them. Is that fair enough? Especially if you're buying with a good criteria, good checklist. Make sure you buy quality property. I don't buy properties outside of capital cities generally. Does that give you a clue? Why? Because in capital cities there's a lot of certainty that they're going to continue to grow. Okay? Can you make good money outside of that? Yes, I have some property outside capital cities that I've made phenomenal returns on. Okay? But most of the portfolio like to stay to capital cities. But you ought to work out your own criteria. This strategy is not going to work, okay, in a small country town because it's not going to double in 10 years. It's not going to double in 100 years. It's going to go the other way, okay? Imagine Broken Hill. Property doesn't double every 10 years in Broken Hill. You can buy properties for like $1,300. People just leave them. They leave town, they buy them fully furnished for $1,300, okay? So don't try it in Broken Hill and say, Jamie, that strategy doesn't work. So that gives us $300,000 in extra money we've made out of thin air over 10 years. Does everyone see that? You've bought this property probably on a 10% deposit unless you've learned how to buy it virtually no money down. And you borrowed the difference. It's now worth $600,000. You've got $300,000 in there from capital growth. Bill and Mary need $35,000 a year. They're probably thinking, well, I don't borrow for property. That means if I borrow for property, I have to work harder and longer to pay off that debt. And they're working hard thinking, I've got to pay off all this debt so then we can retire off the rent. Okay? And if they retire off the rent, they have to share the rent with the government. Is that true? Okay, so they pay tax on that. So they want to overcome that. So let's see if we can be smarter. If they buy and sell property to make a profit, then they have to pay capital gains tax generally. Is that right? So it slows it down, takes up more time. We're going to buy a good property now and we're going to keep it ideally forever in this strategy. It's worth $600,000, gives us $300,000 here. They need cash though. They need $35,000 a year to replace their income. Where can they get that from? We learned tonight a thing called line of what? And a line of credit allowed us to draw what out of property? Equity, or in other words, cash. By just setting up a bank account, they'll draw this down. And they need $35,000 a year. Can they draw out $35,000? They can in the first year. Is there any law against where they spend that money? The banks don't care. They can spend it to pay Woolworths for groceries, go to the Greek islands for a holiday, etc. Year 2, they can do the same thing. They can spend that money. Year 3, take another $35,000. Are they spending money they've worked hard for, or are they spending thin air that's been made while they're sleeping? They're actually spending thin air. If you're spending thin air, could you enjoy it more, do you think? Because you have to work hard for the stuff. It's like you don't enjoy spending because it makes you feel guilty. Is that right? And you don't want to enjoy the lifestyle. We don't want to take any more money out of that property even though they could. So year 4, so if they waited 10 years till they're doubled, then they started to draw this down. So this is their 11th year, etc. Does that make sense? Year 4, 5 and 6, after they've doubled, they could take, say, $35,000 out of this property because it's just sitting there. Why not use it? Because if they don't use it, guess what's going to happen? They die. Someone else gets it. They lose it anyhow. So they might as well use this money they've made. $35,000 here, $35,000 here. Okay, 6 years now. They don't want to take any more money out of there. They want to keep it conservative. 6 years after this property is worth $600,000, do you think this might have went up in value by now? It's in capital city, good growth area. What might it be worth? Could it be worth $1 million? Always be conservative. Let's say $900,000. If it's doubled in 10 years to that, 6 years later, could be worth $900,000. Let's use that as an example. That gives them another $300,000 sitting there. Do you want to see that? They haven't finished using this $300,000, and they've got another $300,000 there. And does this property keep going up in value? Now, if they're not careful, if they don't start spending more money, they're going to get into a vicious cycle, which you must be very careful about. The vicious cycle is they're going to actually be making more money than they can possibly spend. It's just going to ruin their retirement. They have no time to go on holiday 1 week out of 4. You know, it's obviously, it's not going to work for them. Now, in a real world, there's going to be some things you have to overcome, but this gets done, so they've already been overcome. And we're going to look at that. The question to ask, though, $35,000 they're drawing out of here. Do they have to pay income tax on that? Because it's not income. They're spending thin air. There's no thin air tax yet, is there? That's why we don't let politicians come to our seminars. Because that's aha. Mr. Costello said, we need more revenue, we'll just tax the thin air, okay? But they're not allowed, okay? So, does that make sense? So that money is tax-free. Is that legal tax-free money? Yes or no? Yeah. The ATO can look at that and you can do that and they'll let you do that. Why? Because if you don't invest and buy properties to house Australians, then the government has to anyhow. So there's a tax incentive there to make that available. The idea of this strategy is never to sell the properties. Everyone okay on that? That's the idea of it. Yeah, that's what you don't want to have to do it because they'd sell it because people want peace of mind to wipe off the debt. What you understand is that rather than pay off the property, you could take that money and buy another property, then that property is making you more money. You see, I've got one property that is going to double within 2 years. It's $1 million property. I was hoping it would double in 5 years and it'd double in 2. Do you think I'm pretty excited about that? That's at $1 million property doubling in 2 years. That's $1 million in 24 months. People say property doesn't go up in value. Hello. Okay, they don't all do that, but in a capital city, look how many properties have doubled in 15 years in capital cities in Australia. Virtually all of them, unless the ones that got burnt down or something and insured by HIH, and it's like otherwise they're all fine. Okay.